Word up, yo. I am back with another episode at last of Blue Review. I think I'm on episode 48 now, so I don't know if I'll do something special for number 50 or just it'll be just another number. Um, I'm going to talk about one of my all-time favorite movies today that I have on Blu-ray. It's number 3 actually in my top list. Part of a trilogy. Uh, Unrelated by plot, but related by theme. The same filmmaker, and I was going to do all three in one show, but I began last evening and I went through the first show, the first film, and I don't know. I felt like it was going to take a lot of time and energy that I wasn't able to really spare at the moment. I really want to home in on the second movie in the trilogy. That's the one that's my number 3 favorite film. And that's the one I think is really, they're all good to great, but this one is like a masterpiece to me. And it's been often discussed, kind of infamous, notorious when it first came out or when it first was known about in America. I'll get into that in a minute. I'll go ahead and not put it off any longer. It's part of this trilogy, the Vengeance trilogy. It's Old Boy. The cover shot is from Old Boy. These are by Park Chan-wook, who I think is the greatest South Korean filmmaker working today. And this out of print set I got about 2 years ago. Got it for about $35 on Amazon. It's going for quite a lot more now. I wanted all 3 films, and this was the only way to get them. There was another set that was Region B I didn't want to get, and then there was another variation, and for some reason I didn't get it. I can't remember if it was out of print already and really expensive. This seemed to be the compromise, and as when it came in, it turned out it really was much more than a compromise. It was really the definitive Region A set, at least up to that time. Now, I don't think there currently is one. This one was put out by a little label that I'm not familiar with called One, O-N-E. But it is licensed from Palisades Tartan. And Tartan was the company that put out a number of South Korean genre films in the 2000s through their Tartan Asia Extreme series on DVD. Not just South Korean, they also did Japanese and Chinese films as well. Maybe some Korean ones that I'm not aware of. But anyway, I had all 3 of the individual films in this trilogy in the Tartan Asia versions. I've sold a lot of my Tartan Asian titles on my eBay store. I have kept Shinya Tsukamoto's Tetsuo the Iron Man and his Snake in June. Because I can't really afford to upgrade to that nice Arrow Tsukamoto box set with 8 films. It was on my list last fall, and it's just, after that Criterion sale in November, since then I've scantily been able to buy any Blu-rays. I think I bought New Mutants for a small amount, and I got a gift card from a counselor and was able to get that nice Lindsay Baker set. And then I was gifted with the Godzilla Showa era set by channel patron Tim Tolbert. And so it may be a while before I get that. My next on the Wong Kar-wai set. But I may have to wait till July for the next Criterion half off. I don't foresee getting enough money to buy it before then. If anyone wants to gift it to me, though, I'll be glad to make you a channel patron and a shout out and review it immediately. So, yes, this was part of the Tartan Asia series with Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, Old Boy, and Lady Vengeance, or Sympathy for Lady Vengeance as it's the accurate title. Though I think the real title, I believe, was like Gyumja, a sweet woman or something like that. But that's the lead character, Gyumja, and she's Lady Vengeance. So anyway, I've got a pretty The only thing that holds me back from reviewing all of these, really, other than the time I wish to spend on them, especially Old Boy, is I haven't memorized all the Korean character names, and I feel really bad about that. So I do know most of the actors' names, and of course the director, um, and I know the films themselves. But with Old Boy, I'm pretty certain on all of that info, but I'll let you know if I slip on a name here and there. Um, Korean names, there's a until you're used to them, there's a kind of sameness to them. They're like Chinese names in that they usually have the last name first, the family name first, and then the proper name. The reverse of how they do in the West. This is true of most Asian countries, and the last name will usually be one syllable, and then their proper name will usually be two one-syllable words with a hyphen. There's a bit more variety of words and kinds of words and variations on the forename thing in China. Korea, it's pretty straightforward. There's just a lot of people with the last name Park, a lot of people with the last name Lee, and so you get into Lee, Young Ho, and you basically, okay, Young, that's two syllables, but um, basically it's easy to get for me being a kind of a ignorant Anglo to get the hang of remembering all of them. I always have to have material to look at. I can't even remember the name off the top of my head of the director of Parasite, which was kind of the breakthrough South Korean film in the West, and it won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Film, Best Picture, some other technical awards, and I think it won the Golden Globe Award for those. Some of those, it won a Golden Globe for uh, Kang side. I can't get his name right either. Kang, the actor, the lead character in Parasite, who also is the lead actor in Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance and a bit player in Lady Vengeance. Doesn't show up in Old Boy though, but he is one. He's probably the most prominent South Korean actor today. One poll listed him as one of the top 5 film actors living on Earth. That's pretty heavy, but I've been saying that about Choi Min-sik here for years. They're both brilliant. By the way, they're both in a movie called Quiet Family, um, which is directed by the same guy, I believe, that did A Tale of Two Sisters. Um, Blanking on his name too. I should have written this down, but anyway, uh, yes. So, um, to me, Old Boy is the seminal film. I mean, it kind of there was already buzz about like K horror, as they called it, as a follow up to like J horror in the '90s was breaking Japanese horror, a particular wave of it with films, like Ju-on the Grudge and The Ring. Um, Before you die, you see The Ring. So um, K horror was bursting out in the 2000s, and with good reason. I mean, the South Korean films, not just the genre films, but in general, their modern films, even the weaker conceived ones, are so well crafted. I think they're some of the most well crafted films being shot on Earth right now. Uh, within the last 10 to 20 years worth. Even recent ones I've seen are. I don't think there are as many instant classics coming out right at the moment, but there are still great movies. It's really kind of amazing, and of course, Parasite's a good example. But other ones like New World and A Bittersweet Life. Uh, there's several great recent crime films that I think are just fantastic. But it's other genres too, drama as well, comedy even. Uh, so I've got a whole ton bookmarked on my Amazon Prime account to watch, or that I've started watching and haven't finished. But I have watched quite a lot in the last year or so. My longtime friend John Allen kind of got him into that, and he started exceeding me in the amount of South Korean films. He went full on South Korean cinema wise for months. So he was always recommending titles to me, and some of which he had access to that I didn't, because I can really only afford to do them free on streaming. Um, I've paid for a very small amount of movies to rent on YouTube movies in the last like 3 years. Just that I had to see. I was super curious, and I had the money, and they weren't too expensive. But John does that actually a lot. But I can only afford to do the free streaming. I'm trying to remember which ones I paid for. There was one South Korean one I did pay for, but I don't recall. I remember Revenge, the French film. I rented that, and then I bought the Blu-ray when it came out. Good movie. I did sell the Blu-ray though not long ago. It wasn't like a keeper kind of thing. Uh, but anyway, it's been 10 minutes and I haven't really got into what Old Boy is about or why it's one of my top films. So I'm going to back up, take a deep breath, calm down, and discuss this absolute monster of a film. A little bit of background about the film. It is based on a manga, in Japanese comic manga. And I've read the first couple chapters of the manga. To be honest, it's not that great, in my opinion. The premise is great, and hence is the seed for the greatness that is the movie. And there are some interesting scenes that are replicated in the movie. So as an adaptation, though, I guess you would say by the standards I said a few videos ago about the rule of adaptations, how does it stand up as a film on its own right, and how successful is it as an adaptation, i.e., translating the essence, if not the letter of the plot, to the film from the comic, or whatever source material, previous movie, novel, whatever. In that sense, Old Boy by Park Chan-wook is probably a failure as an adaptation if you were hoping to have it even feel the same as the comic. I mean, the premise is equally powerful and heavy. The comic is not powerful to me. I think the art's kind of weak, and it just goes in certain ways that are, I don't want to say predictable, but that do not exploit the potential of the premise. So, Park Chan-wook corrects all of that. He alters quite a bit while keeping the same basic premise. So in a way, you could say it's a successful adaptation in that it's translated it cross culturally, cross media. But as far as the vibe of the comic, I think the vibe of the comic is kind of weak. So it's not a matter of how well you translate that weakness over to a film, but how you improve on it, hopefully. And the film does improve on it vastly. This film was first heard of in the West mainly because it won the jury prize at Cannes. And that year on the jury was Quentin Tarantino, and he was kind of instrumental in getting it to win that prize. And that gave it a certain amount of attention. That and the extreme nature of some of the plot and some of the scenes, and like I said, the K horror kind of genre rising to the fore over here. So it became an infamous film. I didn't see it until 2006, I believe. I bought the Tartan Asia Extreme because it was on sale and I had a big employee discount. This was when I worked at Borders. I didn't buy the regular edition. I bought this giant metal tin, which had like the movie, and it had like tons of other extra DVDs. It had like a cell frame from the movie, and it had a copy of the first edition of the comic book. It was beautiful when you took everything out and just the way it was made. So it was a tough decision upgrading because I couldn't find a comparable single edition on Blu-ray. But when I did buy the set, after I researched it, I found out that every single extra, there was on all the DVDs in that metal box, are on one Blu-ray here. So all I would be losing is the comic book, the metal box itself, and the little film frame. So since I wasn't into the comic book and I'm not a total fetishist like I used to be, I went ahead and sold it. I bought it for about $32 after discounts. Definitely well worth it. I watched the movie. I was a blind buy. I loved it immediately. It was very powerful, and I thought to myself, I'm not going to be able to watch this one very often. It's going to join that kind of rank of film. Now, I've since been a little corrected. I viewed it this week for this show explicitly, and I had not seen it in a little while since I first bought the Blu-ray. But I think total times I've watched this film all the way through are about six. I came up with from 2006 to 2021. So in 15 years, I've seen this film six times. So that's not really an enormous amount in 15 years. But for some reason, I was thinking I was going to have to like wait years to see it. But I've gotten to where I watch Cannibal Holocaust once a year, and I could probably handle the Elephant Man once every 5 years. Um, just to give you an idea of the ones that are emotionally devastating to me. There are other ones that on the surface don't seem as emotionally devastating, perhaps to others, but which I had trouble watching. Un Femme de Menage is by Bakri is one of those. It hit a little close to home uh, with me and with the relationships and women. And so, I still have it on DVD, but man, I haven't watched that in quite a while. I think I've seen it perhaps three times in the 18 years since I bought the DVD. I'll probably be selling it soon. I'm hoping it'll be upgraded onto Blu-ray, but it's so kind of, I don't want to say obscure, but it kind of fell between the cracks as far as French films, and even though it came out when Emile Decan, the star, was starting to kind of peak after doing Rosetta and then Brotherhood of the Wolf, it still kind of got lost in the shuffle. I also bought the novel, which I still have, and it's just devastating also. Um, but anyway, I recommend that one. Un Femme de Menage, or a housekeeper, or a cleaning woman, as it's known to. But back to Old Boy. So Old Boy is one that I'm able to handle more each time I watch it. But that doesn't mean it isn't still incredibly entertaining. And since I don't watch it often, I get caught up in the uh, convoluted nature of the story because it's like a mystery that's unraveling. So that's enough background. Well, one more background thing. It was remade in 2013 by Spike Lee, who was on kind of a remake kick. He remade three or four movies in a short period of years. One of them was Ganja and Hess. He did just a dreadful shot on video version called "The Sweet Blood of Jesus." I don't know what became of this guy. I mean, he's done some great movies, but I in preparing for this, I finally sat down and watched a large number of clips from the 2013 Old Boy by Spike Lee and watched a comparison video between the two. Um, and I was intrigued also because Elizabeth Olsen, who's been killing it as a Scarlet Witch in WandaVision, she was the co-star. And I already knew this, but Josh Brolin was the star. He plays the character that Choi Min-sik plays in the original, ostensibly. And I liked his work in some movies, and he was great as Thanos in the Avengers films. But uh, some films I don't think he's right for. He's a very popular actor. He's got a lot of talent. Um, some films I don't think he quite pulls off. That's just my opinion. I think he's an erratic actor. He's only as good as the director lets him be or makes him be. And I think he's a terrible. On the surface, you go, well, he's really one of the best, up and coming actors in Hollywood of the last 20 years. But I don't know if that's not might not be saying a whole lot. But yeah, and then you watch this stuff, and it's like, no, he's a terrible choice for this character. Um, anyway, I do know some people who like the remake more than the original, and I'm still their friend. I forgive them. I know we all have weaknesses, and it's okay. So, what's the deal with Old Boy? So the basic premise is this guy. He's kind of a character. He's kind of unlikable but likable at the same time. He's kind of a goofy prankster. Likes to get drunk. Likes to womanize. Likes to play practical jokes. His name's Oh Dae-su, played by Choi Min-sik. And when we open with the movie, we see him uh, at the time frame that most of the movie is going to unfold, but immediately goes into a flashback. Uh, this does this a few times, where you have him narrating past events in an extended flashback, and then you come up to the present, and then by the end of the movie, he's narrating the whole movie in a totally present. So it's interesting the way they do it. And his narration's incredible. Choi Min-sik is really skilled. He's very heartfelt at delivering this kind of stream of consciousness uh, thing. I'd compare it to Tony Leung narrating 2046, which is my favorite movie. Both masterful. You know, there aren't many. I don't know if there are any Hollywood actors who could narrate a film on and off in these ways, doing the voiceover, where they could really pull it off, where I would feel the emotion that I feel when I hear these guys, and I don't even know what they're saying without subtitles. Um, but I'm hearing it in my head, you know. So it begins as a slight flashback to how it all started, 15 years earlier, and you know he's been picked up by the cops. He's just kind of a troublemaker. He's hitting on a girl who's there with her boyfriend in the precinct, and you know he's just kind of obnoxious. He's kind of a jokester. He's kind of chubby, kind of average looking, just a regular, you know, kind of Korean businessman, I guess. You know, middle class maybe, and he has a gift that he's going to give his daughter, these angel wings, and he puts them on and does a little dance with them. So he is married. He has a 3-year-old daughter, and he's released under the cognizance, well, in the cognizance, I guess, of his best friend. And they're leaving, and as he's calling, I think calling his wife uh, on a payphone. Mind you, this took place in 1988. So he's on a payphone, and his friend's out there, but uh, you know, when he's not looking and his friend's not looking, or maybe his friend's waylaid, happens kind of quickly. Somebody with an umbrella is outside behind them, and Oh Dae-su doesn't see him, and this person, I guess, renders him unconscious and takes his stuff, including his gift to his daughter. And when he wakes up, he's in like a hotel room, but it's a prison basically, and he remains there for 15 years. And of course, he loses a lot of his sanity. No human contact, no sunshine. The television is his only friend, and he goes through that in some really intense voiceovers. Um, he sees the world changing around him. A lot of political events in Korea and China in the 1990s go by, and then uh, the World Trade Center attack in 2001 is depicted, so you kind of know where you're at. And then not long after that, he's been burrowing, he thinks, kind of like, you know, the Count of Monte Cristo or whatever. He's been burrowing out, and he thinks he's going to be able to get out, and he hopes he doesn't like get out, and he's on a high floor and he falls to his death. He hides this behind his bed. They probably know about it, though. I mean, shoot. I mean, they're got him completely monitored, but you know, he's hoping. And periodically over the years, they will pump in this Valium gas, and they'll kind of give him some upkeep, you know, clean him off, cut his hair, give him fresh clothes. Or many times he tries to commit suicide. They gas him and drag him out and patch him up. He tries to slit his wrist a number of times. And he also begins with a metal wire and some ink. He begins tattooing himself the amount of years he's in there. So right along here, he's got a total of 15 years, and he's just marking the 15th. And he thinks, you know, in a month I'll be out. You know, I've got it all planned. I've got this thing whittled away at. But then he's gassed, and a very striking looking young lady comes in, and she is like a hypnotist, and she informs him when he awakens, it's going to be picture himself awakening in a big field of grass. So, and then we see a human-sized suitcase kind of teetering on its side, you know, vertically. It falls over, tumbles open, and he's inside of it, and he's there's a verdant plain of grass around him, which turns out to be just gardening on the roof of a building. So they've released him on the roof of a building. Uh, his hair is kind of longish. They didn't cut it the last time. Kind of wild looking. I think it looks really cool. And he's got a little facial hair, which he was very clean shaven and kind of ordinary looking when they first snatched him. And he's wearing a all black suit, and he's got a few belongings in the suitcase, like his journals that he kept over the years and things of that nature. Not a whole lot, and just enough that he can carry. And he's got sunglasses, and he can see the sun. And he finds a guy on the roof who's contemplating suicide, and tells this guy, don't die yet. Let me tell you my story first. And that was the beginning shot when he's holding the guy and he's going to tell him the story. So now you're up to speed at that point in it. So there's not going to be any more extended flashbacks. In Park's movie, Sympathy for Lady Vengeance, he goes back and forth with this device quite a few times, up to almost halfway through the movie, and then settles into like a present time to tell the rest of the story in a linear fashion. So he's glad to be out. He's a little crazy. He's kind of lust crazed from not having any contact with females. Like he's in the elevator coming down from the roof, and he's like narrating. He's like, "There's a female human being," because he already like sniffed and hugged the suicidal guy, because it was like there's a human being. So now it's like now there's a female human being, and he's like like completely freaking out, and apparently grabs her and gets kicked out. But there's a few like I guess homilies or aphorisms that recur in this movie that he hears and then rephrases. I mean, quotes them, but in a different context. He starts to see different meanings, and one of them is laugh and the world laughs with you, weep and you weep alone. And so that crosses his mind as he's leaving this building he's been deposited on. And he smiles. And a lot of times he is like that. I mean, little things that would not be amusing to most people, he finds amusement from and value in, because life is so precious to him now and freedom is so precious to him. But he's mainly driven by one overwhelming urge, which is revenge against who did this to him, and finding out who did it and why they did it. And in these journals, he's made long lists of enemies. A lot of them were husbands of women he had affairs with, like everyone in his life he could have possibly wronged. So he pops into a sushi bar, and he's learned a lot from television, watching a lot of like Discovery Channel kind of things, infomercials. So he tends to do that too. He'll narrate like these scientific facts in this kind of like very formal fashion. One character's like, why does he talk like that? He doesn't do it all the time, but he does it when a fact comes to him. And one of the facts is that he saw on TV that the youngest sushi chef in the city is at this particular sushi bar. It's a woman, and she's about 18 or 19, I guess. Her name's Mido. And he goes there and he meets her, and he wants to eat something that's living. So here you come to the first kind of extreme scene, which was not replicated in the remake. There's kind of a joking, shout out to it, but it would make no sense if you hadn't seen the original. But anyway, he eats an octopus, a living small octopus. And, in the bonus features, it's revealed that they had to shoot it twice, so he ate 2 octopi. And Choi Min-sik, the actor, is a Buddhist and a vegetarian. So he did like a little shrine thing and lit candles and did like a prayer chant for the souls of those 2 octopi that he killed. It's pretty wild. I mean, just the fact that the director made him do that, but the fact that he did it and then the context of how he felt about it is kind of fascinating to me. So anything for your craft, I guess. So that it's a wild scene because he's really eating it and it's really being chomped on, and its tentacles are, you know, grasping him as it expires. It's kind of shocks Mido, but he gets a call that he's left with a cell phone. Oh, that's right. Before he goes to the um, sushi bar, this homeless guy gives him a cell phone, and he's like, "Don't ask anything. I don't know anything." And so he gets a call on this cell phone while he's at the sushi bar after ingesting the octopus, and it's his captor, and he's like, "Who are you?" You know, and he starts guessing, throwing all these names out, and then um, he hangs up, and Mita puts her hand on his hand, and he slumps over unconscious. So this is kind of, I think, even at this early stage, uh, the audience gets an idea based on the scene of him being hypnotized right before he's released, that he collapses at this certain sign, these certain signals he's been programmed to react to a certain way. So he's been hypnotized, in more ways than that single time, more times in different ways. And he starts to guess that about halfway through the movie. Um, so you may or might, I thought it was weird that he collapsed. I kind of felt like, okay, maybe it was like triggered, or maybe he just collapses because, whoa, I just got out and I just ate an octopus alive. And this guy called me, and it's too much stress for anybody. Um, but this will become apparent as it goes on. So the plot, is it's pretty complicated in a way. I mean, basically, he has 5 days. He's given 5 days by his captor to learn the why of this. He wants to know the who and the why, but the guy's like, it's not important who I am, but the why I want you to know. And if after those 5 days he doesn't figure it out, then he'll his captor will kill Mido, because by the time he declares this to Oh Dae-su, Oh Dae-su has come to care for Mido, and we'll get into that. And then if he has guessed, then his captor promises to kill himself. But it's a while before he officially meets him. I mean, there's a period where he staggers into the street, and I think it's after. First, he has a fight with some hooligans, and he's thinking, because he was training when he was in there. He was exercising and punching the wall till his hands were bleeding, and trying to get faster. And he lost a lot of weight. He didn't become super buff like the character in the comic book, which is a little outrageous. But comic artists are used to drawing men like that, so superheroes. So, but this is more realistic. But the actor did shed weight for the part, and then gain some weight back later. But so he's been practicing, and when he gets accosted by these hoods, he kicks their ass, like all five of them. I mean, they almost take him on, but then he knocks them, and he's thinking, will 15 years of imaginary training preparation pay off? And he says, I guess so. But anyway, so at one point he collapses in the street, and this guy with a kind of a floppy hat and kind of a members only jacket, this tall guy, is like, Mister, are you okay? And the guy puts him into a car and tells him the address to go to, and he says, good to see you, Oh Dae-su, or whatever. So then he's finally seen his captor. He still doesn't know his name. Okay, so the address that they take him to is one he was at in a previous scene. So essentially, after the sushi bar incident, Mido takes him to her apartment, and that's where his kind of base of operations becomes. And she's got a King Kong poster on her wall, by the way, which I only noticed just this last viewing. She's, a very artistic woman and a chef, and looks very creative, is very lonely. And here's his story, and kind of sympathizes with the loneliness. And because one thing that happened to Oh Dae-su is he began to have hallucinations that ants were crawling out of his veins on his arm, and they were overwhelming him. And she says, people who are alone or lonely often see ants. And you don't know if she's just saying that to him to, normalize what he's going through or what, but um, we see a kind of a flashback of her as a very miserable, lonely young lady on the bus or subway, and sitting across from her down a ways is a human-sized ant. And so this is an element of magic realism that Park puts in his movies. There's a good bit of that in this movie. There's a little bit of it in some of his other movies. There's a good bit of it in Lady Vengeance. But things that I think a lot of times when Americans, especially ones who are weaned on kind of mainstream movies, watch a movie like this, a foreign movie like this, by a director like this, they criticize those kind of things as taking you out of the story and being unrealistic. And that's the point. They are unrealistic. They're surrealistic, and they're expressing a deeper truth or a deeper thing. I mean, Lynch is a master of this, and but he's criticized often by neophytes as well. You have to kind of be on the wavelength, but it is true in general. South Korean genre films don't have the kind of limits or rules that Hollywood films have, in the sense that they will do whatever they feel like, and most times it works. It strengthens the subtext of the film. It strengthens it visually. It gives you visual images as metaphors. Adds to the kind of weird factor. Sometimes it doesn't work, but I would say it's not uncommon in South Korean genre films. I see it less in the other genres, but the horror, science fiction, extreme films, extreme action films, you see a lot of that. And Old Boy really is the kind of film that does it masterfully. And so, essentially, he kind of goes back and forth with this Mido, because he's on the trail of his captor and finds out that Mido has been emailing with this guy, and he's called Evergreen, and he asked her to speak to the Count of Monte Cristo, meaning Oh Dae-su, like I said earlier, a guy burrowing out of his cell. Um, so, he's threatening the guy and asking like questions and emails, and he's on this quest, and when he finds out they've been talking for a while, he thinks she's betraying him, and he can't trust her. Uh, and then a whole bunch of convoluted things happen. Along the way, he meets back up with his best friend, who we saw in the beginning. But he gets pretty far in the quest. It takes about an hour or so of kind of like, initially with her, he tries to track down the kind of, he was fed every day these vegetable rolls, and that's not exactly the word for them. The word's just not hitting me, but you would know it immediately. So yes, and I've had plenty of them. They're delicious, but apparently he had these ones that had a certain smell and a certain taste. So he decides to go all through the area into all the Chinese restaurants and taste these things, and he finally recognizes one, and he gets a lead to a particular restaurant, and then he gets a lead to a particular building, and when he uh, gets to the building, he gets to the upper floor, one of the upper floors, and he realizes this is the building he was held captive in, and there's a guy there, and he is kind of in charge of monitoring all these people, and you see view screens with other prisoners who are there, and apparently, people pay a huge amount of money to him to keep these people here for various amount of time for various reasons. So let's come to the next controversial or memorable scene for most people is he takes a hammer. He's just taking a hammer with him, and he starts pulling the guy's teeth out with it. And he says, one for every year I was in prison. So it's going to take out 15 teeth. Uh, so finally, the guy's like got a mouthful of blood, half the teeth are gone, and he tells him some other information. Um, Somewhere in here, you would think I just saw it. I've seen it 6 times. I could give you the exact order of all the events, but I can't because to me it starts to, I don't want to say blur together, but um, it's all kind of a piece for me. It's all kind of part of his quest, and the order, exact order of certain incidents isn't as important to me. I mean, it is while you're watching, because it does unfold well as a mystery. Um, but one of the things that he faces, when he went to the building, was a bunch of thugs armed with like sticks and knives, and he uh, he tries to test out his theory again, and it works. I mean, and the scene is one take down a hallway, going this way, panning left to right, and I don't know how many. I forgot how many takes they did. I think there is one instance that I saw in the extras where it seemed together, uh, but I could be wrong. Maybe not. I think maybe it is all one take to the end of the fight, and basically he fights these whatever 15 guys or whatever, and he wins. I mean, they beat him, they stab him in the back, and that is one thing on the extras that the knife was a CGI knife. Other than that, everything was CGI. But yeah, it's rough, and he manages to hurt them because he knows where to hit them. He's been training all this time. Breaks their jaws, hits them in the kidney, stomach, and uses the hammer on a few of them, and um, so finally he finishes with these people, and he's got his hammer, and he's got the knife in his bag still, and he gets in the elevator, and when the elevator opens, there's 5 or 6 more of these cats, and he smiles. So again, it's that he's like he's almost reveling in this his freedom, or I don't know, feeling of maybe reclaiming his power after being helpless for so long. And when the elevator door opens, these guys tumble out, and he's defeated all of them. And then he walks along, takes the knife out of his back, and drops the hammer. So it may be at that point where maybe he collapses in the street. I think 'cause he's bloody. I think. But yeah, so he makes up with Mido, and he learns of he starts going through the different levels of things, and with the help of his friend who he went to high school with, he finally narrows things down, clues that Evergreen sends him on the emails and on the texts, and he was one of the Evergreen old boys. They both were, these guys, and that they basically were a group of graduates of this religious school that was run by nuns and priests. And this is however many years ago, 20 odd years ago, maybe 25 maybe years previous. And so they start to kind of piece it together, and finally they get one of his yearbooks, and he finds the guy. It's a Woon Juan something. I always get his name wrong, but Woon is, I think, is family name, Woon, and he's the guy that picked him up in the street and said hello to him or whatever. So he identifies him, and through talking with his friend and also with another person they went to school with, uh, he learns that Woon's sister was in a different class of theirs. She was maybe a year younger than them, and that she died in the brother's senior year. So this is where things get kind of wild. He starts talking to this. He starts talking to Well, his friend starts talking to him, to Oh Dae-su, uh, on the phone while he's looking up shit on the computer, giving it info. And so they kind of piece together who the sister is, and he starts saying, "Oh yeah, she was a big slut, man." And earlier, Oh Dae-su had gone to this place, and he knew he was being bugged. That the captor knew his locations, so he and Mido go there and they search him, and they find this, microcircuitized bug in his shoe, inside of his shoe, the sole of his shoe. So Woon can't track him anymore. So he goes to the little internet cafe, and he's trailing his friend and listening in. And when the guy starts describing the sister as a slut and everything, he snaps a disc in half out of the disc drive and stabs his friend repeatedly in the neck with it until he kills him, and then tells him, she was no slut, and your friend is dead, and it's all because of you. So by this point, there's been a lot of kind of, I mean, by this time he's even more enraged and off the hook, and there's been a lot of back and forth, like for instance, basically of Woon fucking with him. Like at one point, Woon and his bodyguard, this guy Mr. Han, who's always with him, uh, they actually meet up. He gets to the building. We finally figures out the building where Woon lives, and he thinks he lives in the penthouse because the guy had said he lived at the top of the high tower. And so he does that, and they get into the elevator with him. Uh, and he's like, you fucked your sister. And this guy's basically like, you know, um, how to put it. This is going towards the end. But there was an earlier encounter with Han and Woon with Oh Dae-su, the first encounter they had, where he was dressed the way he was when he picked him up in the street and just kind of dressed down clothing. Because normally he's like this tall, slick, handsome, anal retentive, neat knit kind of guy, always perfect tie pressed and suit pressed, and fashionable and precise. And his penthouse has all these amenities. That he lives in the penthouse. There's like a place where his clothes are kept, and it's inside of these four pillars that open up mechanically, and he goes right from the elevator to the penthouse, and he's got his kitchen over there, his bedroom over there. It's interesting. It's cool production design, a set design. So the first time they meet, he tells him, "If you kill me now, you'll never learn the truth." And he also tells him that he had a weak heart. He had a pacemaker put in. Shows him the scar, and he says, if you try to kill me, I'll kill myself. And he has this little thing with a green button that's going to kill him instantly, make his heart stop instantly. So he's always like one up on Oh Dae-su, and he's very cocky, and he's very smug, and he laughs. He really acts kind of like a jock, like a bully kind of guy. And he's very arrogant about his wealth, and though he kind of takes it for granted, but you can tell there's something else. This thing is eating him alive. The reason why he's done all this, and so what they finally realize, going back to their next encounter, which will be their last encounter, is that Oh Dae-su confronts Woon when they go into the elevator, and he says, you slept with your sister, and he knew the sister died, and Oh Dae-su's already got kind of a theory about what happened, and he's had kind of a flashback. He finally kind of remembers her meeting her back in high school, and he saw her and her and her brother Woon having sex in this kind of empty building. There was a crack in the window, and it kind of it starts like this photography session, and then kind of this slow seduction, and she's kind of like pushing him off, kind of like, "Don't quit," and he, and but then kind of yields to it, and they kind of get it on, and Oh Dae-su starts this rumor. Well, he tells his one friend and tells him not to tell anybody. Well, it turns out that guy told people, and then they told people, and it got around the school, and it messed with her mind, and she started to think she was pregnant, to the point where her period stopped and her belly seemed to swell, and so the brother and sister meet up on this guardrail above this giant, ravine, and she wrestles herself out of his grasp. He's trying to save her, and she's trying to kill herself. And she grabs his uh, camera, which they'd been playing with earlier, and takes a picture of herself and says, "Remember me," and she falls to her death. And that's the thing that Woon's been living with all these years. Not only that he was having the incestuous affair, he doesn't really have any apologies for that or think there's anything wrong with that. He, but the death of the sister, which he blames squarely on Oh Dae-su's talking too much. Um, and so he stored away this plan for revenge all this time. And when Oh Dae-su was an adult and got married and had the 3-year-old daughter, he kidnaps him. He makes this plan to where not only he asks him, you've been asking me, why I captured you. They go to his penthouse and he changes clothes. And he's like, and he explains a lot of this to Oh Dae-su, and he's very cocky and very taunting and cruel. Oh Dae-su feels like he has the moral high ground because he knows that what the guy was doing was, socially taboo, and he's kind of sorry, for his part in her death, but at the same time, he thinks this guy is really a hypocrite, having a moral high ground over him. But Woon finally, he's so cocky and smug to the very end. He's like, you've been asking why I imprisoned you. He said, you should ask me why I released you. And um, Oh Dae-su has left Mido at this other place, and there's this kind of ornate uh, gift box with a ribbon on it and this cool kind of jagged purple design on it. And uh, she doesn't know what it's there for. And the guy holding her captive is the guy's teeth, Oh Dae-su uh, tore out. And he's waiting on an order from Woon to get her to open the box. So turns out there's a exactly similar box there in the penthouse. And it's kind of rough because Oh Dae-su kills a couple of his guards, and they talk a while, and then they get into all this, and then Mr. Han starts throwing him around. He's like totally kind of deadpan guy with dyed white hair, and he manages to mortally wound Mr. Han. Apparently, he stabs him in the ear with some scissors, and the guy's like freaking out, but he's still like grabbing Oh Dae-su, trying to kill him. And to stop this, Woon, who's just cold as ever, just walks up with this small revolver he carries on himself and blows Han's head off, and then gets on with it, and you know shows the box to Oh Dae-su, and it becomes clear then what he was really doing to get revenge. His ultimate revenge was not locking him up; it was locking him away long enough to where he could do all this other stuff. Which basically, he had been told that his wife died and he had been blamed for her death, so he was technically a fugitive when he got out. And his daughter had been adopted out to some Scandinavian couple, which they use that idea again, and Park uses that idea in Sympathy for Lady Vengeance too. Except in that one, it's really true. In this one, it's fake. It's a fake story, and actually, Woon has been secretly raising his daughter for all this time, and Oh Dae-su opens the box, and it's a photo album of him and his wife and the daughter as a baby and his 3-year-old, how he left her. And then as he turns the pages and the music kind of mounts, you see that it's Mido. So Mido is his daughter. So he's been sleeping with his daughter. And like I said, he's already kind of figured out that he's been hypnotized quite a bunch. And Woon reveals, that they had both been hypnotized. He was hypnotized to go to the sushi bar. He was hypnotized when he called him on the phone, when she touched his hand. That's why he collapsed. But she was also hypnotized to respond to the way he answered the phone. And so, he's like, it's hard for get two people to fall in love, even with the hypnosis, but I kind of pushed it along. And of course, she was lonely and he was lonely, and they felt a familiarity with each other, which is the first thing they say to each other. And that's why, his daughter looks so different, but he looks so different, but they still seem familiar to each other. So she doesn't know. And so Oh Dae-su, he calls her and he says, don't open that box, please, whatever you do, just wait on me. And the way he's talking to her is he's starting to kind of talk in this tender, almost paternal way to her, like, Oh Dae-su will be there and it's okay, honey, and sounds more like a father than a lover now at this point. And so it's this weird thing going on in his head, obviously. So this guy's not going to relent. He's going to go through with her finding out and destroy them. And so Oh Dae-su, this is when we get to the last like super extreme scene and the climax of all this. These are all spoilers, so if you haven't seen this movie, you shouldn't have watched this video. But essentially, he begs Woon not to tell Mido the truth. He says, "I'll be your dog. I'll be your servant. Remember, we were old boys together in the school." And then he cuts his tongue off with the scissors to prove that he'll never talk again. It's pretty excruciating. And so Woon kind of relents and he calls the guy with the now gold teeth and says, don't open the box. So he's going to spare Mido the truth. So Oh Dae-su's kind of destroyed. And, the guy's playing audio tapes of the first time they had sex back, over the loudspeaker in the penthouse. It's all pretty distasteful. And he blows his brains out after he has kind of a flashback which shows the details of her slipping out of his grasp to her death, his sister. Woon is played by this guy named Lee Woo-jin, I think is his name, and I think that's right, Lee Woo-jin, and he's an incredible actor. His character seems like this shallow, swaggery asshole, but he's got this pain eating away at him that even though it's twisted by societal terms and taboo, he truly loved her. And the last thing he says to Oh Dae-su is, despite everything, me and my sister still loved each other. In other words, despite the fact they knew they were related, he's like, I hope you and Mido can do the same. Or maybe he asked, can you and Mido do the same? But so that's the question, can he? And so we find the last narration of Oh Dae-su telling the story, and he's telling it to the hypnotist. And they've met in the snow, and he says, I wrote you this letter. She's reading the letter, and he's like, I wrote you this letter because I have no tongue. And he wants her to hypnotize him to forget. And this incredible scene, she points, and the camera is first tight on them and then pulls way back. And she points to this tree, and she says, concentrate on the tree and watch it turn into a stone column. And then picture yourself in the penthouse of Woon. And you're seeing yourself in the mirror. The mirror is you, and you're the monster. You turn and walk away, and for every step, you age a year. You die at 70, a peaceful death. And only the real you that doesn't remember, that isn't the monster, is remaining. And so he wakes up from his hypnotic trance, and she's gone, but Mido has found him in the snow. And some people have speculated this whole section from here on is like in his mind or hallucination. I don't believe that because Mido looks at the footprints and she sees his footprints coming toward her in the snow, and then the others backing up and the two chairs. So the hypnotist was there. Uh, and then the other ambiguous thing to some people is, does he remember? And he hugs her and she says, "I love you, Oh Dae-su." And you see his face and he's smiling, and he's crying and he's smiling. And so you think, oh my gosh, they're going to stay together as a couple because they don't have no idea they're related. And then the last kind of shot, on his face, he starts to kind of wince and look a little, it's a grimace, of pain, of realization, possibly. And some people have said, it's ambiguous. Some people have said it's obvious that he forgot. A lot of people say it's obvious he did probably remember. I don't know how obvious everything is, but based on the nuances of Troy's acting, I would say, yeah, he's happy when he's holding her, but then his face contorts because he does remember. So she had warned him the hypnosis might not work. But it's a powerful ending. And the music is powerful. The music all through the movie is amazing. Very lyrical, very sad, and also very propulsive during the action and suspense scenes. This movie is really one of the most well-crafted films I've ever seen. Sorry I went through the plot in such excruciating detail, and I missed a few beats there, but it's really the experience that stays with me, the power of it, because it doesn't matter how plausible some of the plot is, or how weird some of the shots are, or how taboo the twist of the movie is, which they didn't use in the remake for that very reason. They thought it would just completely bomb in America and outrage everyone. But they're unflinching in the original, and that's also made just for the movie. That wasn't in the manga. It was Park's invention, and it's one of the most powerful emotional experiences I've ever had with a movie. It's very resonant. I mean, how much he changes over the years and through all this hardship, and also how much his daughter has changed, not to the as extreme, and then also how much Woon has changed because of the traumatic experience in high school with his sister dying, his sister he was, sleeping with, and that he's, so there's two levels of revenge. At first it's Oh Dae-su's revenge for the person who captured him for 15 years, but it's really that itself and him being released to have sex with his daughter is the revenge of Woon. So again, like with Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, there are these cross purposes of revenge. It's not just one character getting revenge on one character for one thing. It doesn't get quite as complicated as it does in Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, which is one of the best things about the script, how interesting that movie is. So this is a little more. It's a lot more focused. It's tight. Photography is flawless. The acting is like whole next level. I mean, Lee Woo-jin as the villain, by the end, I can't say you feel sorry for him, but when you see his pain over his loss and the fact that now his revenge is complete, what does he have to live for? And he just blows his head off. And that's it. And first time I watched it, I kind of cheered when he blew his head off because I had so much hatred built up for this cat. But Choi Min-sik is really, it's indescribable, really, to me, the level of nuance he brings to this character, how convincing each change in his personality reflected in his physicality, his physiognomy, and the violence, like with the hammer and the hallway scene and eating the octopus and cutting the tongue off. Those are the extreme scenes people hook onto, and their reasons. That along with the incest thing, why some people avoid the movie or have a problem with it. See the remake; it's much more dull. In the remake, like I said, Josh Brolin isn't Elizabeth Olsen's father. She plays the Mido character, and they do have sex, but there's no incest, so it's almost like she's just some girl he meets that helps him with the mystery. And the twist they made up for the remake is it's kind of incest related, but not directly. It's not it does involve the vengeful captor, but sort of. But it doesn't involve Oh Dae-su having incest with his daughter. Really disappointing cop out. Why make the movie really? Um, uh, anyway, uh, that's probably a movie I'll never watch all the way through. Anyway, for the record here, to lighten this up a little bit, it's getting a little darker. I may be running out of charge and have to go soon, but I've wasted over an hour of your time. This threatens to exceed the Breaking Bad finale. And, a lot of it is rote, and I went through the plot and everything. And like I said, if you've seen this, these aren't spoilers and might be kind of dull, and you might be like, why did he forget this? What happened there? But you know what? I'm doing this in one take, and I'm just going to do it. I decided just to do it to the end. I'm like El Topo's aphorism. Every road I take to the end. And there's other aphorisms like I mentioned in Old Boy, like I mentioned one, but then the other one, whether a grain of sand or a rock, they both sink as fast in water. And one, the real most powerful one, is the suicidal guy tells him in the beginning, though I'm no better than a beast, don't I deserve the right to live? And it's pretty incredible. And the hypnotist says, when she's finished his letter and they're out in the snow, which is just such a beautiful scene, and she's such an enigmatic character, and she's like, I don't have to help you, I mean, she's like, but one thing struck me, and it was that quote about, do I not deserve the right to live? And like I said, that's one of my favorite shots in the movie. It's just one of those things to where the virtuosity of the camera work calls attention to itself, but that's okay. I mean, this is an artistic film. I mean, there's a lot of flourishes like that, like the human-sized ant. And then when he's getting ready to hit the first guy with the hammer, he has a little dot, 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 dot from the hammer to the guy's forehead and a ding sound. And that's a little bit like something Tarantino did in Pulp Fiction. And probably people thought that was a little, too out of the box at that time. But I watch all these weird movies, so none of this is out of the box for me. This is like where I'm comfortable. This stuff is like the real deal to me. To me, it's the Hollywood cliches and pandering and worn out devices that put me off. Like I can't stand Pulp Fiction, but I love Old Boy, and so and to me, Pulp Fiction is a conventional film because I'd been watching Nicholas Rogue movies and other movies before that deal with shuffling the timeline and breaking the linear order of the stories and weird flashes. I mean, you start with Rogue and Godard and all this kind of stuff, and you're really Tarantino is kind of like whatever. So I'm sure like 50 people probably unsubscribed just now, but anyway, I'm just kidding. I can't love every director. But I do respect Tarantino for doing his part in making this film known in the West and giving it an award it's richly deserved at an awards ceremony that I do take seriously and have a lot of respect for, unlike the Academy. And well, the Golden Globes are slightly more credible than the Academy Awards, but not much. But yeah, those guys in Breaking Bad, they did fucking deserve those Emmys. Occasionally it works. The stars align. I've talked about that before. So my conclusion is that all hyperbole aside, if you just want to talk about craftsmanship and resonance and power and the level of technical prowess of the filmmaking on every level, from performances down to the music, I believe Old Boy is one of the greatest films ever made. I think you can throw that kind of Citizen Kane, Vertigo kind of thing in there. Maybe it's my Citizen Kane and my Vertigo, but I do think it's worthy to stand. I think it transcends most modern films. I think it transcends definitely transcends the K horror wave or trend of the time. It transcends the brilliance of modern South Korean cinema, which is hard to do. I mean, to me, it does cross over to the West, despite subtitles, despite nasty scenes and incest. I think it really I think anyone with an open mind who loves cinema who watches this will be hard pressed to refute that it's one of the best crafted movies they're ever going to see, and emotionally powerful. Now, you might not like every scene, you might be offended by some of it. You might like the Spike Lee movie better. You might think it's a better adaptation of the manga. You might like the manga better, with the ripped, muscle bound guy who's kind of boring instead of Choi Min Sik. But I don't care. To me, I'm gonna stand by my verdict, and I'm gonna wrap up this video because now this is gonna be my longest video I've ever shot, and I made it through it. Damn it! I really did want to talk more about the subtext and the meaning of the movie and the psychoanalysis and the feelings. I think I touched most of that though, but it took me a while to get there because I'm kind of like tracking my way back through all the intricacies of this plot line. So anyway, I recommend this movie if you have not seen it. If you watch this video and don't care about the spoilers or you've read them elsewhere, you need to watch this as soon as possible. I don't think it's available for free streaming anywhere on an American platform right now. I'm pretty sure it's not, but if you come across it or on YouTube, somebody boots it up there for a week, you need to watch it and let me know what you think. I'm curious. I have an old boy T-shirt I bought. I'm obsessed with the film, the character, the actors, the director. Park Chan-wook made a movie that was arguably even better crafted and as emotionally devastating, Sympathy for Lady Vengeance, after this. But that could be his overall masterpiece of filmmaking. But I prefer Old Boy by a good bit. But it's hard to fuck with Lady Vengeance. She takes all these techniques that I've been talking about. The film takes all these techniques I've been talking about and pushes them way even further. The visuals, the narrative, the violence, the irony, the taboo subjects, the wild cinematography at times, and kind of surreal, magical realism scenes. I'll review that at some point. That's in this set too. And there's two versions of that movie. One which the director prefers called the fade to white version, which I didn't know about until I got this set. But he gradually desaturates the color. Like it's a full color in the beginning, and all through the 2 hours, he gradually, I guess he does it's all on a computer, gradually brings it down to where it's totally black and white at the very end. And that's part of the psychology of the character and her journey for revenge and redemption, which is just as compelling as Oh Dae-su's. So anyway, not Park Chan-wook movies that I've seen that have come out since this have not satisfied me to the level of those two films, or even to the level of Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. The Handmaiden I'm going to rewatch. It was pretty popular, and Amazon Studios made it, but I was a little disappointed. But I'm going to watch it again soon. And some of his short films are very good, parts of anthologies, and Stoker was just not as beautifully made. It wasn't a bad movie, but this is only Hollywood film, and the lead actress Mia, whatever, she's great in it, but it's just I don't know. It's almost like he didn't make it, and that's the same thing that happens to a lot of people in Hollywood. So anyway, though, I still love Park Chan-wook. He's a master. And watch Old Boy. My battery is officially running low. Take care. Love you guys, and I'll see you.